Good afternoon, everyone. For those of you who haven't met me, my name's Kevin Summers, and I'm the incoming superintendent for Aztec Municipal School District. And with us today is Mr. Ron Price to lead us in our learning for Aztec Connects number 89, episode 89. I feel like I know you so well, Ron. I've told you this before. I've watched all of these. I wait with bated breath to see what the next one is. And so it's really fun and exciting to participate with you. And now I get the chance to do it just you and I. So with that said, Mr. Price, what are we learning about today?
You know, before we do that, Kevin, I want you to teach me. You're an educator. What is bated breath? I've always used that expression too. I have no idea what it is. Do you?
It's a great question. I could lie to you here, but I think the mark of a learned person is to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'll find out and I'll get back to you.
You know, that's up there with without further ado. What's ado? I don't, maybe I want more of it. I don't know. Anyway, there's a concept that I write about in my book, Play Nice in Your Sandbox at Work. The I in the NICE model to resolve conflict is interests matter, not positions. And let me tell you what I mean by that. When you're in a situation with another person, and it doesn't have to be hostile or ugly, whatever, but it's a state of disagreement. It's so easy to let that take on a life of its own and go in a direction that it doesn't need to go. Part of the reason is the people don't really understand what the difference is all about. They focus on positions. I want this. Well, I want this. They never ask that short but powerful question, why do you want that? And if they would, a lot of disputes could be resolved handily. Let me give you an illustration. Two guys in a college library. I don't think this is a true story, but it certainly could be. Two guys in a college library. All of a sudden, one guy gets up and he opens a window. A guy seated nearby shortly thereafter gets up and closes the window. Well, you can probably guess what the first guy does. He goes back and he opens the window. Second guy gets up and closes the window. This attracts the attention of the librarian, who comes over, turns to the first guy and says, "What's going on here?" He says, "Well, I want the window open." Turns to the second guy. "What's going on here?" "Well, I want the window closed." So the librarian knows their positions, that, all right, that's the dispute. One wants the window open, one wants the window closed. But then again, she asks that short question that we hate to get from toddlers. She turns to the first guy and says, "Why do you want the window open?" He says, "Because it's getting stuffy in here and I need to study. I can't afford to fall asleep. I need some fresh air." Okay. Turns to the second guy. "Why do you want the window closed?" "Because I felt a draft coming on. I can't afford to get sick. I need that window closed." So now the librarian doesn't just know their positions. She knows their true wants, concerns, interests, needs, whatever you want to call them. So she says, "All right, go back to where you were. We're going to close that window. I'm going to open a window in the adjacent room. If necessary, I'll put a fan on so you'll have your fresh air. You won't have a draft and I'll have peace and quiet." Kevin, it's a humorous story in a way, and yet it's so common that people can become embroiled in a dispute and they have no idea what it's really about. And if they could, another way, if other than asking, "Why do you want that?" ask, "What would that do for you?" If I grant you what you're asking, what would that do for you? And listen for the answer, because the answer is probably going to be their bona fide interests. And Kevin, there may be ways to meet somebody's true interests and concerns other than the way they're asking. Let me give you another example on that. And then I want to hear your thoughts on the matter. I got called to do a mediation one time between a manager and a key employee over money. The key employee wanted to raise. The manager kept saying, "Can't do it, not in the budget." So I got called in and asked me if I'd come in and do a mediation between these two. And I said, "Sure, let's try." And shortly into the mediation, Kevin, I turned to the key employee And I asked her what had to be the dumbest question she had ever heard up until that point in her life. I said, why do you want to raise? Why do you want to raise? When I'm doing training in the workplace, I'll ask you, raise your hand if you wouldn't like to be paid more money for what you're doing. Come on, we all want to raise. But you know what she told us? She had worked at this organization significantly longer than others that she was working with. She had more education in the fields that they dealt with than others that she was working with. And she had more experience in the field, having worked other places before she came to this organization. But even though she had more experience, more education, more time on the job, she wasn't being paid much more than other people who were just starting out. And she didn't think that was fair. Kevin, you wouldn't argue with her. I wouldn't either. We live in an economy where if you have more education, experience, time on the job, you should be compensated for that. So the manager says, well, I hear you now. Now, had she told him that before? I don't know. Did she tell him in a way he could understand? I don't know. Did he just not listen to her? I don't know. I don't care. He heard her that day. And he said, now I understand you, but I still can't give you a raise. It is not in the budget. He said, but what I can do is I can reduce your work week, I should say, by 5 hours a week and still pay you the same amount of money. Kevin, I don't know if you're a math major or not, but did that give her a raise, an hourly raise?
You betcha.
It sure did. We'd have to figure out how much was she making, divided by 40, divided by 35. But it gave her that gap. You see where I'm going with this? It gave her that prestige, that recognition. And that's what she wanted. She didn't want more money. She would have taken it, but that wasn't her driving force. And once we were able to identify the real interest and concern, that dispute ended. It had been going on for weeks, if not months. It was over just like that. So I don't know, Kevin, is this making sense that if you can identify the real interest, you got a good shot at resolving the conflict?
Absolutely. I think what I hear you saying, Ron, more than anything is when we're talking about interest, that's interest versus position. Those things are certainly true. Absolutely. What I hear from that in my own mind is truly just communication theory, right? A lot of times in life, we find people who are listening so that I can respond to you,
right?
But a lot of times not listening so that I can understand you. You know, and that also kind of takes me back to the work of a good mentor friend of mine. He's not really a friend, I guess, but he is a mentor of mine, Simon Sinek. In his book, Start with the Why. People don't buy what you do. They buy why you do it. What's the reasoning behind it? And so kind of getting to the root of the why in all conflict, in all discussion, I think is extremely important to further communication. And I think about, past experiences, but the one that is most prevalent in my mind is the first knockdown, drag out fight I ever had with my wife. And it wasn't about anything. It wasn't about my wife, nor was it about me. It was about a dishwasher. And we were so mad at the other for how we loaded the dishwasher, but we didn't have the conversation as to why we did that. And to be fair, that was my fault. She kept putting bowls on the bottom in the back, and I was like, no, bowls go on the top in the front. And then as we walked through this argument, and it was really an argument, I'm kind of underplaying it, I guess, but it was really a true argument. The why came out. Well, I'm doing that because if I load them in the back, the next one can go right in front of it and right in front of it. And I don't have to open the dishwasher all the way. And that's genius. I wish I would have known that. But I'm not yelling because I would lose the argument if I did that. That's not true. But absolutely, having idea of the interest, not necessarily the position. I knew her position. I had seen it. I witnessed it. I've fixed it several times. But knowing why changed the entire dynamic.
You know, another point that you bring up there, Kevin, is it's so easy when somebody has a different opinion than you, it's easy to take that as a personal attack that you don't know what you're talking about, but I do. And so by clarifying the real interest, the why behind it, I don't know about you, but I think it makes it easier to not take it so personal. What say you?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. You know, just because opinions are different doesn't necessarily make one more correct than the other. And it's something that I actually tell my children all the time. Sometimes it's best not to be correct, right? It's best not to be right, but it's better to understand. I love it.
Yeah, I like that. We need more of that in our society too. As soon as you have a different opinion than I do, then you're my enemy and I can't talk to you anymore. And I've got to berate you and demean you. And I mean, I'm tired of it. I'm just tired of it. So looking at the clock here, Kevin, I think it's time for you to close this session out. Welcome, by the way, to the district. I'm excited about Aztec District. We've had a great history for many decades. I know Mr. Carpenter's predecessor, so he inherited a district in good shape. You're doing the same, and I wish you well. I know that things are going to continue. Aztec students are going to get the education they need and deserve. So thank you for the role you're going to fill in that regard.
Well, that's very kind of you. Thank you. You know, the one thing that I can hope to do is not mess anything up.
Okay.
Of course, we're going to make mistakes, but you're right. You know, Superintendent Carpenter, Superintendent Paul before him, they've created great systems. They've made Aztec a great school district, both locally and across the state. And so our biggest hope is not to mess things up. But we are eager for the challenge. We're eager to get on the ground running. And I thank you. I think that this learning is something that's beneficial not only to myself, not only to leaders around the district, but everybody as a leader within our community, whether we're talking about, you know, the effect that parents have on their children, the effect that children have on their peers, the effect that teachers have on their peers, their own children, and their students. These leadership lessons are life lessons for how communities operate. And so we thank you for your time, Ron. And everyone else, thank you for joining us. We hope that you appreciated today's dialogue and that you'll tune in for more Aztec Connects in the future. So with that said, have a great afternoon.
Bye for now.